Growing up, I wasn't the loudest or the flashiest. That role was reserved for my elder brother Darren, the golden child. The one who won medals in school sports, the one who brought home certificates in popularity, and the one who made my parents beam with pride so often that I started learning to read approval through silence. I didn't envy him. Not truly. I just learned early on that my worth was quieter. I was the one who came home with consistent grades, who helped mom with dinner when she had migraines, who sat with dad when his blood pressure shot up. I was the one who didn't need reminding to put family first. And I did. Over and over. When Darren went through his rebellious phase, skipping college classes and chasing vague business ideas, I stayed the course. I graduated, found a job in an accounting firm, and began working my way up slowly. While Darren needed rescuing time and again, I made sure my parents never had to lift a finger for me. By the time I turned 30, I had moved into a small but elegant apartment of my own. I'd been promoted twice. I still didn't buy designer clothes, didn't vacation abroad, and didn't splurge, not because I couldn't, but because I was saving for something bigger. A gift. Not for myself. For my parents. My parents had always rented. Dad often talked about buying a house after retirement, a dream he kept putting off for expenses, education, and loans. Mom, on the other hand, longed for a small car, not to show off, just to make travel easier, especially for her back and knees. So, I planned. I researched localities, evaluated loan structures, explored car models, and after 3 years of meticulous saving and planning, I finally made it happen. The day I handed them the keys to their new house, I watched years of aging lift off their shoulders. My mother looked around the living room like she had entered a palace. My father, usually composed and reserved, was speechless for a full minute. And when I pulled the cover off the shiny gray hatchback parked outside, registered in my name, they both hugged me tighter than they ever had. They cried. I cried. For once, I thought, maybe this is it. Maybe this will be the moment they look at me not as the support system they could lean on, but as their daughter who deserved to be celebrated. Little did I know that celebration was not mine to have. We planned the housewarming ceremony a month later. It was modest, just as I'd wanted, but warm and meaningful. Extended family, close neighbors, a few childhood friends, and of course, Darren and his new fiancée, Shweta. She was charming, ambitious, witty, and polite, but I couldn't help noticing how my parents beamed at her. Like she was the crown jewel entering the family. I didn't mind. What mattered was the house. I had hired a decorator to keep the interiors functional but inviting, off-white walls, minimalist furniture, lots of natural light, and plenty of indoor plants for Mom. I even got an armchair for Dad by the window where he liked to read. The evening went beautifully. Guests complimented everything: the soft lighting, the cozy rooms, the backyard space. And every time they praised something, my parents proudly nodded, never correcting them when they assumed Darren had done it. I brushed it off. I told myself they were just overwhelmed. That the moment to acknowledge me would come. It came during the dinner toast. Dad stood up, clinking his glass lightly with a spoon. I just want to take a moment to thank everyone who's here today, he said, his voice brimming with emotion. This home. It's a dream. A long-awaited one. And I must say, it wouldn't have been possible without our Darren, our son, our pride. He has always stood by us, always inspired us. The guests smiled. Some clapped. I waited. And waited. Mom joined in with a laugh. He's the reason we even dared to dream so big. He kept encouraging us, saying, "Don't worry, I've got you." She looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You've made us so proud, son." I stood there, plate in hand, frozen. They didn't mention me. Not once. Not even as a footnote in the speech. Darren, for what it's worth, looked mortified. He kept glancing at me, his smile faltering. He tried to say something as he approached me, maybe to acknowledge the elephant in the room, but I stepped away. I couldn't breathe. I walked into the newly furnished kitchen, my kitchen, the one I stocked, painted, built, and stood there alone. My chest was heavy with something I couldn't define. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was disbelief, laced with a kind of heartbreak that doesn't erupt, it simmers. Even if they had forgotten in the moment. Even if they had meant to include me later, how do you forget your daughter gifted you an entire life upgrade? I didn't demand praise. But I did hope for gratitude. Acknowledgement. Something to say, we see you. Instead, all I got was erasure. And in that moment, I realized something deep and painful: they never saw me. Not when I stayed up nights budgeting for this gift. Not when I held my breath every time my bank account dipped. Not when I signed the loan papers. Not even now. To them, I was still the backup plan. Well, not anymore. I didn't leave the party early. I stayed because leaving would have caused a scene. Because I didn't want to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me upset. So I smiled. I nodded. I even helped clean up. But inside? Something had shifted. Permanently. When I finally got back to my apartment late that night, I took off my heels, sat on the floor with my back against the door, and just stared at the ceiling. Empty. I wasn't crying. I was numb. That party wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a slow, casual erasure of years of sacrifice. My parents didn't just forget to mention me, they rewrote the story, and in that version, I didn't exist. It wasn't anger that drove my next actions. It was clarity. Because love, when given without respect, becomes servitude. And I had been serving quietly for years. The next morning, I took out the loan documents for the house and the car. Both were in my name. My parents had no income to qualify on their own. Retirement had rendered their credit capacity zero. I had co-signed everything. I had paid every rupee for the down payments. The EMI notifications came to my phone every month. They lived in that house because I said yes. They drove that car because I trusted them. And now? That trust was broken. I called the loan officer at my bank, someone I'd worked with closely throughout the process. Hi, I'd like to discuss removal from my current co-signed property and auto loan. Simone, are you sure? You're the primary applicant. I'm sure. It took some work: reapplications, identity verifications, and policy paperwork. I had to legally remove myself as co-signer, which meant the bank would reassess the loan under my parents' names alone. They'd need to provide a new co-applicant or collateral to sustain the terms. I knew they wouldn't qualify. I also knew what that meant: the bank would eventually reprocess or recall the loan unless they refinanced. Either Darren would step in or the house and car would go under review. I didn't feel guilty. For years, I had sent them $5,000 monthly, covering expenses, helping them live comfortably. I never missed a payment. I never made them feel the weight of aging. But that day, after removing myself from the loans, I did one more thing. I opened my banking app and canceled the automatic monthly transfer to their joint account. No note. No explanation. Just silence. The silence I'd lived in for 3 decades. 2 weeks later, the calls started. First, it was Mom. Her voice was unusually sweet, like she was trying to butter me up. Simone, the bank just called. Something about loan verification? They said something's wrong with the co-signature? Did you change something? I sipped my coffee slowly. Yes. I removed my name. The house and car aren't mine anymore. A long pause. Then a nervous laugh. Sweetheart, why would you do that? You know we're retired, we can't manage these things alone. I know, I said simply. So, what now? You expect us to lose the house? Not at all. Darren's the reason for everything. I'm sure he'll handle it. There was a silence so thick, I could almost hear the blood drain from her face. You're being petty. I exhaled through my nose. No, Mom. I was being generous for years. You just never noticed. Click. The next day, Dad called. Unlike Mom's sugary tone, he went straight into stern lecture mode. Simone, this is ridiculous. You don't treat your parents like strangers over one party speech. You didn't forget to praise Darren. You chose to forget me. We raised you. We made sacrifices too. And I repaid every single one of them with interest. A house. A car. $5,000 every month. What more did you want, my dignity? He hung up. And just like that, the emotional blackmail campaign began. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly became invested in our family matters. Simone, they're your parents. Don't forget that. They're old, they don't understand how to express things. We all know you're the responsible one. But do you really have to prove it this way? One aunt even had the audacity to say, if you're so successful, what's the harm in continuing to support them quietly? Quietly. That word again. As if women like me are born to serve without applause. As if it's our duty to give, and theirs to take gratefully or not. When I didn't respond, pictures of family gatherings started showing up on my phone. Old photos me with my parents, childhood birthdays, vacations where I stood behind them holding bags while Darren posed like a model. Then came voice notes of Mom crying, telling me how she couldn't sleep, how her heart was breaking, how ungrateful I was becoming. But not once did she say the one thing I was waiting for, we're sorry. They were reacting to the consequences of being cut off, not reflecting on the choices that led to it. And I stayed quiet. I didn't explain. I didn't argue. Because sometimes silence isn't the absence of love, it's the beginning of self-respect. By week 3, things got ugly. Not just passive-aggressive phone calls or guilt-laced messages. No. My parents escalated it. I was in a meeting when my phone buzzed non-stop. When I finally checked it, I saw what had happened. My mother had posted on Facebook. When children forget the hands that fed them, it's not just painful, it's betrayal. We raised our daughter with values. Gave her everything, and now she's left us to fend for ourselves in old age. What's the price of love? Apparently, a house and a car. #heartbroken parents, hundreds of likes. Comments. Family acquaintances from my hometown chiming in, children these days have no shame. That girl was always so cold. So sorry, Auntie. God sees everything. I sat frozen in my office, the rage simmering under my skin like boiling tar. It wasn't just a post. It was a calculated character assassination. They knew what they were doing. Painting me as the villain to rally sympathy and social pressure. And I knew exactly who had encouraged it, Darren. The same brother they'd praised at the housewarming. The one who hadn't spent a single rupee on their care, but now apparently had time to spin narratives. I didn't respond on Facebook. I wasn't going to dance on their stage. But I did one thing. That weekend, I sent a group email to the entire extended family and some of the mutual concerned uncles and aunties. Subject: setting the record straight. Dear all, since my parents have chosen to take our personal matters public, I'd like to offer some clarity. Yes, I bought my parents a fully furnished home and a new car. Yes, I paid for it out of my pocket. Yes, I sent them $5,000 monthly for the past 5 years. And yes, I have now stopped. Why? Because despite all this, my existence was erased in front of a room full of people at a party meant to celebrate my sacrifice. When love turns into entitlement, and generosity into obligation, boundaries are necessary. I am not angry. I am not ungrateful. I am done. With respect, Simone, I didn't expect a warm response. And I didn't get one. What I did get, though, was silence. Suddenly, the WhatsApp forwards stopped. The phone calls slowed. No more long voice notes about morality. The storm was clearing not because they understood, but because they were embarrassed. They had exposed themselves. The next confrontation came not from my parents but from Darren. He showed up. Uninvited. Outside my apartment on a Sunday morning, wearing a self-righteous scowl. "Can we talk?" he said, sunglasses pushed back onto his head like some savior in a Hollywood drama. I stepped aside. He didn't waste time. "What the hell are you doing, Simone? You embarrassed our parents. You humiliated them publicly." I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "They did that themselves, Darren. I just told the truth." He laughed bitterly. "You could have spoken to me first. You didn't have to throw this tantrum." "Is that what this is? A tantrum?" I asked calmly. "Funny. Because when you were failing in business, when you moved back home and couldn't pay rent, no one called you a burden." He looked away. "I never asked them for a house or car. But you let them pretend you gave it to them. I didn't know they'd do that. You think I stood there expecting a speech?" "No, I think you stood there and enjoyed it," I snapped. "You liked being the hero for something I did. You liked the applause. And now that it's inconvenient, you're suddenly full of principles?" Silence. His face hardened. "You're acting like you're the only one who's ever helped them." "I am," I said flatly. "At least financially. And I never asked for worship, Darren. Just acknowledgement." One sentence. But they erased me again. And I finally decided I won't let that happen anymore. He paced the room, clearly losing control of the conversation. "Now they might lose the house. Do you know what that'll do to them? Then maybe you can step up for once. Cosign. Take the loan. Pay the EMI." He went quiet. I knew what that silence meant. He couldn't. He wouldn't. "You're unbelievable," he muttered. I smiled. "No, Darren. I'm just done being used." He left without another word. That night, I got a message from Mom. "Why are you turning your brother against us too? Family doesn't cut off family." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a journal, one I'd neglected for years. And I wrote one line: "They only love you when you're useful. Stop being useful." And just like that, the final tie in my heart loosened. 3 months. That's how long it took. The perfect, pristine illusion they'd been holding on to of respect, reputation, and financial stability began to crack and then collapse. It started with a call from the bank. They had begun sending recovery notices to my parents. Without a guarantor or alternate cosigner, the loan was being restructured at a higher interest rate. Since my father's pension was barely enough to cover groceries, and Mom had no income of her own, the EMIs began to bounce. The car loan fell into default too. Darren? He didn't step up. Of course he didn't. He made a lot of noise when I cut ties, but when it came to actually putting his money where his mouth was, he evaporated. Turned his phone off. Avoided their calls. Shweta, his fiancée, apparently wasn't keen on funding in-laws from her end either. So the house that once hosted warm evening tea and Facebook-worthy parties got slapped with a repossession notice. The shiny new car that they flaunted in the neighborhood was reclaimed. But the most brutal hit? Their image. See, when people heard they lost the house, the whispers began. The same relatives who cried betrayal when I cut them off now said things like, "Simone did what she could. They must have taken her for granted. Honestly, she was too nice for too long." The tide turned. Sympathy dried up. And they were left facing a truth they weren't prepared for. They had burned the only bridge they had left. Then came the last attempt. It was a Sunday afternoon when I heard the knock. I opened the door and there they were, Mom and Dad, both looking smaller. Tired. Not dressed in their usual neat attire. No smiles. No self-righteous tone. Just exhaustion. "Can we come in?" Dad asked. I nodded. Not out of softness, but curiosity. They sat down, quietly, like strangers in my home. Then Mom spoke, her voice cracking. "We lost the house. And the car." I nodded. "Darren," he stopped picking up our calls. "He said he's busy with his startup. We even tried calling Shweta, but she blocked us." I didn't say anything. Let the silence settle. "We were wrong, Simone," Dad added, more hesitantly. "We took you for granted. We were caught up in how people see us." I tilted my head slightly. "You were caught up in pretending your son was a savior. We were proud of him." "And ashamed of me?" Mom's eyes welled up. "No, just blind. We thought love meant making the weaker one feel stronger. But we never realized what it meant to the one who was actually strong." They were choosing their words carefully. They knew they couldn't push anymore. Then Dad looked up at me. "We're staying in a rented room now. It's hard. We're not asking for the house or the money. We just want our daughter back." That should have made me melt. It didn't. Because they weren't really asking for me, they were asking for the benefits of having me. I studied them both. The weathered lines on their faces. The humility forced on them by consequence, not self-awareness. And then I spoke. "You want your daughter back?" That should have made me melt. It didn't. Because they weren't really asking for me, they were asking for the benefits of having me. I studied them both. The weathered lines on their faces. The humility forced on them by consequence, not self-awareness. And then I spoke. "You want your daughter back?" They nodded quickly. "Then you'll have to meet her where she is now." "And that girl?" "She has boundaries." Mom's lip trembled. Dad looked away. "I will not fund your lifestyle anymore. I will not pay your rent. I will not be your retirement plan. But if you want a relationship, a real one, we can build that. Slowly. Without conditions. Without expectations." They were stunned. Mom whispered. "You mean no money? No money. No loans. No praise for Darren while I sit in the shadows. No erasing me." Another pause. Then Dad nodded, slowly. "Okay." It wasn't a warm reconciliation. No teary hugs. No dramatic music. It was two people humbled by their own actions. And one woman, finally standing tall, not because of what she could give but because she chose self-respect over sacrifice.